Welcome to the MAM Journals. Today I'm at the NEC Classic Motor Show, and no, don't worry, it is going to be about bikes. Silverstone Auctions was actually created in 2011 by a guy I know called Nick Whale, and he's done a remarkable job building the business in a comparatively short period of time. If you think something like an auction like Bonham's has been over 220 years old, so to be so prominent in the auction market after just 11 years is remarkable in my opinion. A couple of years ago, a guy called Mark Bryan joined the business, and he really brought that expertise and knowledge and enthusiasm, which is what you need for bikes. And he's now, their average sale, they do about 150 bikes every sale. There's 142 here today, and I'm just going to have a wander around and do what I usually do, see what takes my eye, and hopefully talk you through a few interesting bikes. Hope you enjoy the video. No motorcycle auction is complete without a Z900, a famous bike that was even actually considered a classic when it was first introduced in 1972. It was actually launched in Europe in the 72 Cologne show, and then appeared in 1973 in the UK. It was actually voted Motorcycle Bike of the Year, which was a reader's vote 4 years running. So it certainly made a huge impact when it arrived. This bike is one of the last of the 900s. This is what's known as an A4, and you can tell that at a glance, because certainly in Europe, if you can see that it's got twin discs on the front. You had an option of twin discs on the bikes during earlier years, but not many people took that, certainly not in America. But it's quite, Z900s are really rivet counters' dreams, because the expertise and knowledge of being able to identify which bike is what is definitely an art form. Certain things give you a clue, but you really need to be an expert to know exactly what you're buying, as not surprisingly for bikes that are now 50 years old, a lot of them are, I would politely describe them as bitsers, and if that sounds critical, it's not really. It's just that naturally you do end up repairing and replacing parts as they go, so very few of them are actually original. The ones that are, of course, are worth enormous money, but the ones that are still usable are valuable, but not as valuable. This bike, 1976, as I say, A4, is estimated to go through the ring later on this afternoon at between £10,000 and £12,000. I think those prices are softening a bit in recent years, perhaps because of the economy, although in fairness the American exchange rate may help, because these bikes, certainly nice ones of them, do cross oceans. Little things you look for when you're trying to identify whether it's a European bike or American specification bike are things like, does it have a strap over the top? This is a UK registered bike, but the fact that it hasn't got straps suggests to me that it was originally American, as does the short mudguard at the back. These mudguards, they rotted out really easily, and a lot of them have been replaced. You can get copies, obviously from China, but some of them are good quality copies, but most of them are only available in the short version rather than the original European long version. Whether they've got reflectors on them or not is also normally a good indication as to whether they're American market or UK market. But when I'll take you to another one, and I'll give you another examples of how that characteristics can be identified. As most people know, they actually developed the Z900 slightly later than they originally came to market, because they'd had a 750 on the go in the late 60s. They went to see the CB 750 at a show, I think it was the Cologne show. The engineers had a good look around it and immediately canned the idea of launching their own 750, and went off, and I think the project was called New York Steak. So that tells you what market they were aiming at. Now, the Z1s came out in initially a number of colours, obviously, but it was this colour, and perhaps the most famous of them all, which in the UK are called Jaffas, because of their similarity in coloration to the old Jaffa cakes that we used to eat, and they were candy orange and candy brown. Now, I think this colour is particularly striking, and this is possibly the nicest one in the show here today of the Z900s. They're estimating this is probably going to go for, if I just look at the price range, 20 to 25,000. So that would need a keen buyer to get to that level, but it gives you an indication of the differential in prices that you can get through similar models. This model has been restored tastefully, but clearly it had some work on it. The paint's been done. The cases on it are more polished than they originally came from the factory, certainly. If you looked on the original photos that we just showed you of the A4, they were more like that finish when they came. And this, as I say, you can tell it's an American market. One, because it was a 72 and they weren't in the UK then. There's reflectors on the front, which is reflective of, I think, California. But if I'm wrong on that, please feel free to correct me. And on here. And again, it's got the short mudguard at the rear. But what's confused me slightly is this strap, as I always thought strap was European, but one of the proper experts may well correct me and say no, they did come through like that and it was an option. The bikes were remarkable at the time, actually. They produced just over 80 brake horsepower, and if I tell you that an MV Augusta 500 Moto GP bike produced 80 brake horsepower, that gives you a clue of quite how remarkable, well, this is a road bike. Road tests at the time claimed you could do 130 on them, but you were probably prone and in your swimming trunks for most of us, but they certainly were the king of the road. The Benelli 750 Say is an interesting bike with an interesting story. It came about through a guy called De Tomaso, who is probably more famous for cars than he is for bikes, but certainly everywhere he went he energised them. He was an interesting guy in himself. He raced in Formula One. I think he had 2 Formula One races. He was an exiled Argentinian because his family had been involved in a coup, and he had to leave the country pretty quickly. He set up in Italy and began consolidating motor vehicle manufacturers of various types. He bought Benelli and decided that he wanted to make a straight 6, which the engineers weren't ever so convinced about, and in typical De Tomaso style, he said, well, let's just go and look at the best engine out there and see if we can convert it into a 6. So they actually picked the Honda. I think this is a 554 engine with another 2 pots on it, and it took them a little while. In true Italian style, they launched it 1 year, and about 2 years later the bikes actually started turning up. This is quite a late version. This is a 1979 one, and they certainly caused quite a stir. They didn't sell particularly well. They were massive amounts of money. We've just been looking at a Z900, and these were probably 30% more expensive than that, and they were twice as expensive as a Honda 754 in a similar period. So I think they sold about 3,400 of them, something like that. So quite a rare bike, and special in its terms of history for motorcycling, because it was the first straight 6 that had come to the market. Obviously others followed, Honda with the CBX and Kawasaki with their 6-cylinder version, but this is the one that opened the batting. So certainly in road bikes, race bikes are a different thing together. But fairly basic engineering, lovely 6 exhausts, fabulous sound. They weren't particularly fast, nor the handling people say is good, but I think if you rode one now, or having got off on a modern bike, you'd probably have a slightly different view of that. But a very interesting and historic bike. They think this bike's going to go between 17 and 20,000 pounds. I saw one recently in a cafe stroke dealership called Coty's in Chipping Camden, actually, and they were asking £17,000 for theirs, so that feels like about the price range it is. Be interesting to see what it actually goes through later on this afternoon. In 1979, Benelli bought out the 900 version, based on the same engine, but obviously a bigger bore and stroke in order to get the additional capacity and to try and keep it updated with the competition. It didn't sell particularly well, but did have a cult following, as indeed Benelli did, certainly at that time. It's interesting, I mean, Benelli, like most motorcycle manufacturers, has had a bit of a checkered ownership profile, and it's now actually owned by a Chinese company called Geely, who also happen to own Volvo. But so a brand that's still available in the market today, but although they have facilities in Italy, it's now a Chinese company. Now this bike, altered slightly, obviously different, not just in its bore and stroke, but the fact that they'd gone to more conventional thinking in terms of where to put the alternator. Obviously you need to turn mechanical engine energy into electrical energy, and now the alternator is on the side there. They'd avoided that on the 750 to keep the narrowness and put the apparatus to do that behind the cylinders, and which made it an unusual bike to look at. This bike, as you can see, is a barn find. It's offered without reserve, and if I'm honest, I struggle to think how anybody could restore this and do so at a price where the bike would be worth more than the money that went in. But that's not to say that it's not a project worth doing, because not everything's about money in life, and some people will just want the opportunity to actually build this back up again to its former glory and enjoy owning it. And I'll look forward to seeing what it goes through the auction and hope that somebody gets what they want. This is a Moto Guzzi Le Mans. It's an 850 twin. Interestingly enough, it was actually also owned at the time by De Tomaso, who owned Benelli. Moto Guzzi got themselves into difficulty. It was taken over by a conglomerate, and De Tomaso saw the opportunity to buy it from the ashes. So this is a classic bike in its own right. It's certainly, most of us have followed bikes for any length of time will recognise this. The Series 1, the Mark 1, and this is a Series 2 of the Mark 1, and it's not quite right in terms of authenticity. This seat's not the right seat, those forks aren't the right forks, but I remember these fondly actually. A friend of mine had one, and at the time, as I had a Kawasaki 650 F3, and we used to go out in the evenings with our girlfriends, now my wife, and go, as you did in those days, go pop for a drink somewhere, and then we used to make, let's say, good progress on the way home. So I'm pretty familiar with how fast or otherwise these are. This was actually faster, ultimately, than my 650. Did about 130 miles an hour, or certainly that's what the clock said. But the 650, this is about 70 brake horsepower. The 650 was about 66 from memory, so they were pretty evenly matched. This is a nice handling bike, and certainly my friend at the time could throw it around a bit, and we had some great fun. So I remember these very fondly. They are holding good value. They're estimating this as going through the auction at somewhere between £10,000 and £12,000. So it certainly held its money a lot better than my 650 did. I don't go to many sales when I don't see either an RC30 or an RC45. They're of course Honda homologation bikes for the World Superbike Series, and this was their opening of the batting. The series itself started in 1988, and Fred Merkel took the RC30 to a championship win in that inaugural year, and indeed afterwards. The bike also enjoyed significant success at the Isle of Man, with a certain Carl Fogarty riding it. They normally go for somewhere between 25, just over the 30, depending on history and condition. This bike was originally a German market bike. The price when you bought them new was £8,500, which is a lot more than other sports bikes at the time, but clearly it's a reasonable investment, but probably more of a joy to own than just a great financial return. So I'll be interested to see what this one goes through. It's a bike I've always aspired to, but I am a bit nervous about buying one, simply because I'm not sure that they are great road bikes, and certainly the gearing and the clutch would make riding through traffic pretty interesting, but they are a very purposeful and very successful bike, and what a great part of Honda's history. Some of you may recall from the video from the Bonham's auction at the Stafford Classic that I actually took a shine to one of these. This one is an even nicer example of the 999R. It's actually only got 47 miles on, so it's definitely in collector's territory rather than somebody like myself who rides bikes. And I think this would probably go somewhere between 20 and 25,000, because there can't be many like this. The 999, of course, in the sales showrooms, it wasn't doing particularly well, but it did actually have a better history on the track in the 90s, when World Superbikes was actually nicknamed the Ducati Cup. But they won the championship 3 years on the 999, only sort of just interrupted by, I think it was Troy Corsa on the K5 Suzuki, who managed to break up the party a bit. But 2003, 2004 and 2006 world champions on the 999 versions. A very purposeful machine, lovely condition as you'd expect, lived in somebody's living room, and be interesting to see what actually price it goes for. I'm always drawn by these 748 Ducatis. I think they're a thing of great beauty, and a lovely little engine on them. They were actually brought out. This is the SP version and came out in 94, 95. This is actually a 95 bike. I actually bought one of the first ones that came into the UK and thoroughly enjoyed it. It was almost like a homologation bike in so much as they were actually trying to do a race series with them, but I don't think it quite worked out the way they'd hoped. But when you actually pick them up from the showrooms, you can either get standard exhaust, road exhaust on, and a conventional chip, or you've got a chip and these exhaust pipes. Needless to say, we all fitted those exhaust pipes from the chip straight away, and so I've probably still on the shelf got the original exhaust from mine, but I don't suppose anybody will ever want them. Why would you? But fabulous bikes. Was really handled very well, they drive very well. This is estimated now to be between 8 and 10,000. I don't think I paid much less than that when it was new, so certainly not investment as such if you bought one from you, but certainly a great deal of fun. Second one I had, they then went, after they made the SPs, they had a little while, and then they began to call the sort of upmarket one an R, and sadly I took an R to Donington Park and ran out of talent and managed trying to chase the Suzuki 1000, which let its oil go, and unfortunately we were vanished off into the distance with a 748, never to be seen again in any sense that you'd recognise it. And I got a pin in my and a screw in my thumb as an ongoing memory. So, but despite that, I remember them very fondly, and I think they are beautiful bikes. Be interesting to see if they get the price between the 8 and 10 that they're looking for. Yeah, that's another one of the Z900s that's on sale today. That's actually a Z1B, so that's a 75 bike. They did the Z1s, the Z1As, the Z1Bs, and the Z900A4 is the sequence before they then went in 1977, they went to the Z1000. Again, estimate on that is, I don't know, probably 10 to 12, something like that, in terms of what they're looking for it. A little Suzuki A50 there. These things make remarkable money, really. I mean, the estimate for that is between £3,000 and £4,000, and I won't be the slightest bit surprised if it actually makes it. That's only done 4,250 miles, so that's probably about as far as you'd ever want to do on an A50. This, I'm not sure what the collective noun is for monkeys, but it's probably a troop, and every sale I go to, there is a troop of Honda Gorillas or monkey bikes, all at various prices, but again, remarkable values we get for them. These bikes will all go for something between £3,000 and £4,000, which to me seems a lot of money, but I guess they get used as paddock bikes or just a bit of fun, and people enjoy owning them. And if they do, why not? Well, that had an interesting day. Just been sitting through the auctions, I think I've tested Stuart's patience about as far as he can get, and I just wanted to let you know sort of what some of the prices are and how it's gone. We will be putting the prices on all the bikes that we looked at on the screen, so you would have already seen some of those. But I think it's interesting how values change and how are reflecting fashions and interests. This is an FSE, which we didn't talk about before, but they have been very popular. That went through at just over £6,000. It's a very nicely restored version, but to give you an idea of value, this bike, a Ducati 600, never the most exciting of Ducatis when it was new, but it's got 18,000 miles on it and went for just over £2,000. So you can have, for the price of one of those, you can have two Ducatis, if that takes you to it, or if you really want to go from sublime to the ridiculous. If you look over here, right, so this bike, which is a 1982, I don't really know how to begin to describe that, NCZ50 Motor Combo 49cc, went for £3,200 plus commission, which is 15%, so just under £4,000. And this little monkey bike, the 1967, so a very early monkey bike, went for £6,800 plus commission, so that's going to be coming up to £7,500, which is remarkable, but interesting in equal measure. The bike behind it, the RC30 that we did cover there in the review, actually went for £25,000, which is about average on what I've seen. And Silverstone actually did very well. They sold the highest priced one that I've ever seen, and may well be the record. What I call a push bike, i.e. only had miles that have been pushed on, and I think they got £65,000 for that. So the very top of the market is a different value to these, which have been used. That's not towards the top end. I think maybe the German market may have put people off a little bit, but that's going to be with commission. That's 28 3/4. So a nice bike for somebody's collection. We watched the Z900s go through the auction, obviously. That one, as you've already seen on the screen, went for just over 20,000 and was definitely, in my opinion, the nicest of the bikes, the earliest of the bikes, and probably the most original, although it's obviously, as I say, been restored, but nicely so. This one here was the one that went for the least money, which very genuine bike, an A4 version, which sort of confirms in my mind that it's really the A4s don't hold the value that either the Z1, Z1As, Z1Bs do, and this went for just over 9,000, but quite a nice example, not had much restoration and not been overly fettled, although there are one or two things on there, as there are on every Z900 that I see, that are not quite as they left the factory. I think the prices on the Zs are softening a bit, but a nice one is still worth a lot of money and good fun to ride. This bike, as you know, I reviewed it a few moments ago, and they put it through the auction. I think it's very nicely done, and I am a big fan of the 748s. The SPs I think are better than the SPSs, and they're probably scarcer than the Rs, so quite rare beasts. And I was quite surprised when it wasn't getting the money bid on it that they'd hoped we'd get between 7 and 8, which I thought was quite a low price anyway. But of course they announced during the auction that it's been what's known as a Category D write-off, so that clearly has affected the interest. It got to 5.8 on the hammer, but I'm not sure that it's actually sold at that price. But they are nice bikes. SPs I think are slightly more than the SPSs, Sport Production Specials, and the SPRs, the ones that the two models that came subsequent to this, one of the very early SPs. Anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed this short video and you found some of the bikes interesting and informative. But most of all, what I hope that you do is ride safe and stay well.